Eve says, Dags is known for that.
Dagny says, Chrissy, welcome. Alvaro, welcome. Sweet says, did I get it right?
Alvaro says, hello.
Dagny says, if you see the red ball over your head, yes. Welcome, Poison. I'll get you all next round.
Poison Arrows says, thanks Dagny for TP2. Sure thing.
Dagny says, hey, you're welcome.
Complex says, what side is this sweet girl? I don't see a ball.
Chrissy says, red, I think. Sweet says, wasn't sure what happened, had ball and then it was gone. Dagny says, Chrissy go red please. Poison go blue please. Sweet says, first time player and yes red.
Good morning, or afternoon, or is it evening? And welcome to Valkyrie Forest Capture the Flag.
Eve says, the balls sometimes get knocked off for some lag reason.
Dagny says, Alvaro go red please.
Eve says, it happens.
Complex says, reset. And go to your BASC. Rounded it please and thank you.
Eve says, yeah, if you lost your ball, you didn't get the notice. Round is over. You can go home.
Dagny says, sweet tart, click the base and accept the experience. Goo. Okay, you got it.
Eve says, Count, and I did not have a pleasant experience.
Dagny says, welcome, Melita. Melita says, thank you.
Kielo says, did you both kiss?
Dagny says, Melita, go blue, please.
How do you like the tune? Did I compose that, or was it Ennio Morricone?
Eve says, that was more pleasant, but still ended sort of badly.
Kielo says, you French kiss now?
Eve says, not that I know of.
Melita says, oh da oh.
Complex says, you guys keep splitting.
Eve says, I blame him. He never listens.
Tiberius says, he don't cheat as good as you.
Eve says, he has his moments.
Complex says, count. You are flying everywhere in your bubble.
Eve says, Hamby has some glorious moments. He.
Complex says, what is that?
Count says, weirdest thing, got jettisoned.
Complex says, I saw. Lol. You were like flying, I think. Not sure.
Count says, Sock's fault laughing out loud.
Eve says, you never know what is going to happen around here.
Butch says, ain't that the truth?
Count says, I have fly disabled. I mean jumps.
Complex says, right? Laughing out loud.
Dagny says, welcome Romeo and Berg.
Eve says, oh my God.
Complex says, that was crazy whatever that was.
Eve says, there is nothing I hate more than when Socks gets to return the flag. Eve slaps Essex.
Mila says, laughing out loud.
Dagny says, welcome Tia. Tia says, hi and thank you. Dagny says, Romeo and Berg go blue please. Tia says, I brought fresh arrows with pointies. Birgit says, thank you. Dagny says, Karina and Amy go red. Melita says, oh, pointy things.
Alvaro says, need to go.
Eve says, by Alvaro. Thanks for coming.
Dagny says, Tia go red.
Eve says, hi all new peeps.
I'm but 6. Mom here.
Eve waves big. So far we gave established that Hamby doesn't listen and Tiberiu is annoying.
Dagny says, here we go.
I'm but 6. I made 2 relog be right back.
Eve says, so that catches you up on all that has happened so far.
Hamdi says, listen to what? Count sends the information to the head scribes.
Eve says, see.
Raijin says, 3. Hello.
Eve says, hi.
Hypert says, hello.
Socrates says, this lag is getting worse and worse every day. What are AWS doing?
Aimbot says, I have no lag.
Hamdi says, maybe Vok have to find somewhere else for capture the flag, it's getting more lag every day.
Complex says, you crashed. From lag.
Dagny says, Shane, welcome.
Eve says, I was lagged as fuck.
Rygene says, me too.
Aimbot says, no, I had to relog.
Karina says, oh my god, lag was terrible for me. Dagny says, join Blue Shane.
Eve says, but it was still fun. Lol.
Chrissy says, AWS isn't the issue, Dagny knows what the issue is.
Mila says, laggy as usual.
Tiberius says, Vox Rock /. Always fun.
Eve says, what I hate is I have to keep going into third person to see if my bow is drawn instead of shooting the ground.
Mila says, laughing out loud.
Socrates says, and Chrissy, would you like to tell the rest of us?
Rygene says, 321. Kielo says, use beacons. Rygene says, Pers teach me.
Eve says,
Dagny says, let me balance.
Complex says, what am I teaching?
Eve says, that sounds like an OnlyFans kind of thing.
Rygene says, 321.
Aimbot says, to lag laughing out loud.
Chrissy says, I've said it several times already, way too many scripts on this sim.
Complex says, 321 go. Finally, someone gets me. Laughing out loud. Rygene says, yes, laughing out loud. Complex says, how about Satmon no script day? 321 go.
Chrissy says, sim just needs to be cleaned up. Dagny says, I'm moving Karina to blue.
Socrates says, the scripts are event-driven.
Eve says, I marked her safe.
Chrissy says, no, they're not.
Socrates says, if there are no events, then the script's just idle.
Kielo says, yawns.
Chrissy says, a ladder timer or sensor based. Dagny says, here we go.
Eve says, but if a tree falls in the forest, does it still cause lag? If you don't see it?
Rygene says, yes.
Eve says, lol.
Raijin says, you heard it. Taberi says, thank you so much for fun. Is midnight and work very soon. Less than 333,333. Replace me, please.
Eve says, later to bury you. Eve hugs.
Hamdi says, just Chrissy and Becky have no lag, I think.
Chrissy says, just learn to read this sock. joyazo.com link. I have lag.
Raijin says, Tay flag. Tiberiu says, G and Eve, don't cheat too much, except if you have to.
Eve says, Okies.
Chrissy says, 1198 script event / second. Karina says size. Dagny says welcome Ray. Go blue please.
Mila says, many heavy scripted evas on the sim.
Eve says, that's only because I ate extra donuts and jiggle a little when I do my fancy moves.
Hamdi says, kick Heavy scripted out if it is.
Eve says, given that the human eye probes tracks about 3 events per second.
Complex says, Rygene. 321 go.
Dagny says, Eve, the question you should be asking is, if a tree falls in the forest and you're at home alone and burp up that donut, will anyone feel the lag?
Eve says, 1198 seems excessive.
Complex says, can we play? FFS.
Hamdi says, I think it's Becky scripts and Pure and Kai's kick them all out hee hee.
Kielo says, scripts are like Second Life girl. They sent you sexy pictures, but when you find them on Facebook, they look like your grandmother.
Sway says murderation. Birgit says, please let's play. Chrissy says, it is, most sims are under 600.
Eve says, lol.
Tia says, I think it's Pers but bone deformer. Karina says, I think it's Hamdi's internet infecting us laughing out loud.
Eve says, if we don't play, then everyone has to listen more to my philosophy of life.
Mila says, laughing out loud.
Complex says, Tia is still waiting for those videos. Laughing out loud.
Dagny says, I'm on red.
Eve says, so.
Raylan says, hello all, am ready.
Hamdi says, laughs.
Tia says, you are the star.
Complex says, just like you.
Eve says, I think it all began near the Protestant Revolution.
Socrates says, if a tree falls in the forest and you don't see it, is it in a state of superposition between dead and alive?
Rygene says, hello Raylan. Complex says, 321 go. Good God.
Eve says, no.
Raylan says, and hey, I'm playing via a hotspot on a moving train. What could go wrong? Rygene says, go 321.
Eve says, quantum physics is made-up math. I blame my death on Socrates.
Raylan says, they're all trying to kill me.
Eve says, good. You deserve it.
Raylan says, I am on your team, Eve.
Eve says, so. You still deserve.
Raylan says, face bombs. Everyone spank Eve.
Hamdi says, Becky give the aiming machine my name I think laughs.
Eve says, I almost pulled off one of my most miraculous escapes ever, though.
Rygene says, Beshi.
Eve says, note the word, almost.
Rygene says, you still here, yes?
Eve sighs.
Chrissy says, I feel Eve just missed her bubble.
Kielo says, we first hunt the rats, then we deal with the rest.
Eve says, this rat got second wind. So, PFT.
Complex says, so much splitting.
Chrissy says, second bubble you mean?
Hamdi says, can I go red I can deal one thing lag or this team.
Eve says, Hamdi.
Complex says, laughing out loud. Rygene says, so much sleeping.
Dagny says, Hamdi come red.
Eve says, after all I have done for you.
Dagny says, I'll send a red to blue. Sweet says, had a great time today but do need to go so red down one. Dagny says, thanks for playing sweet.
Hamdi says, laughs.
Sweet says, was a great new experience. Dagny says, complex go blue.
I'm but says, like a coitus interruptus.
Complex says, no. And no thank you.
I'm but says, she can't be blue sorry.
Raijin says, laughing out loud.
Dagny says, fine then come back.
Raijin says, she is red period. Complex says, you what Rai said.
Dagny says, Tia go blue. Chrissy says, Tamai.
Raylan says, today I learned AIM is a Big Bang Theory fan, I think.
I'm but says, oh.
Sway says, drop of blood.
Raylan says, that is where that reference came from, yes? That is where that reference came from, yes.
Tia says, tell Blue, I am sorry I shot you last round laughing out loud. Dagny says, welcome X-Sarah Riddler.
Count says, mark you teams, etc.
Eve says, hi.
Dagny says, X-Sarah Riddler joined blue team.
Hamdi says, if red lose will go back, blue laughs.
Karina says, seems blue is weaker now? Chrissy says, 10v13? Dagny says, click the base and accept the experience to get your game tag, blue ball.
Complex says, we good.
Eve says, we are never weaker than anything.
I'm but says, it's all fun.
Karina says, Hamdi went red though.
Complex says, 10v13 is good. Kielo says, lucky we don't have polyamory couples here. If they all get the privilege to stay together, it will take 4 hours to make the teams.
Tia says, my FPS is high today.
Eve says, now that Hamdi left.
Raylan says, we got lyric in return.
Eve says, we going to win every round. Eve sticks out tongue at Hamdi.
Hamdi says, we'll be back.
Dagny says, in moving count to red.
Hamdi says, in with the winner team.
Melita says, oh yay. Dagny says, 10 seconds. Melita says, here county.
Socrates says, Handy, now we are going to start losing.
Hamdi says, Dagny promised me that.
Dagny says, hold up. Pika is here.
Complex says, we have been holding 20 minutes. 3:21 go.
Hamdi says, if you lose we'll go back blue, no problem OSC.
Tia says, everybody's sounds are so funny.
Socrates says, breast physics. If I turn it off, maybe I will have less lag?
Dagny says, welcome Pika.
Raylan says, Imsa going to start shooting.
Socrates says, how do you turn it off?
Dagny says, yes, you can join red.
Hamdi says, 'cause we don't play so we try have some fun.
Complex says, true.
Karina says, Salty is here.
Aimbot says, I have no lag and everything on ultra.
Kielo says, does someone want a beer while we are waiting? Complex says, I never thought I would agree with you, Hamdi. Laughing out loud. Raijin says, laughing out loud.
Karina says, I was thinking a 3-course meal while we wait.
Complex says, stop bragging while we all die in the lag.
Dagny says, red team 12. Blue team 12.
Hamdi says, I think Second Life give everybody some good days and some bad days.
Dagny says, here we go. Pikahotas says, thy. Hello everons.
Raylan says, salty, we need salty. Raijin says, salty is mine.
Dagny says, next round.
Raylan says, I called her first Rajin.
Eve says, sheesh.
Dagny says 2 on landing. Patience, friends.
Hamdi says, yay.
Raylan says, how did Lyric end back on red when she was sent to blue? Patience. I met her once. Did not care for her at all.
Aimbot says she was kicked.
Raylan says, kick her back over here. Complex says, Dagny said fine, come back. Raijin says, no, she's red noon, complain laughing out loud. Complex says, 14 hours, 9 minutes, and 41 seconds. Aimbot 1, Totoro resident, she can't be blue, sorry. 14 hours, 9 minutes, and 47 seconds. Raijin Dervil McDowell, Caddy Morrissey laughing out loud. 14 hours, 9 minutes, and 47 seconds. Dagny Ravenhust. Fine then, come back. 14 hours, 9 minutes, and 52 seconds. Raijin Dervil McDowell. Caddy Morrissey. She is red, period.
Dagny says, Salty and Alex go blue, please.
Raylan says, oh my god, so this is Aim's fault. Raijin says, laughing out loud.
Eve says, of course.
Complex says, I blame Aim. Raylan says, Aim dies first. Raijin says, don't touch my daughter.
Eve says, well.
Aimbot says XD.
Eve says, after Hamdi.
Complex says, no. Raylan laughs.
Dagny says, Mila go blue, please.
Eve says, we just keep getting more dangerous. Now I bet you are jealous, Hamdi. Eve pokes out tongue.
Kielo says, 5 eternities later. Complex says, 8 games in almost an hour and a half. Unacceptable. Raylan says, I gotta go in 10 minutes. Let's roll. Complex says, we did 32 games the other day. It was fantastic.
Dagny says, in moving Ivar to red.
Kielo says, I could go take a shower between each round.
Eve says, sadly I spent a lot of it dead, and talking shit too.
Complex says, next year. Raijin says, yes, and make food for me and Pures.
Dagny says, okay, starting.
Complex says, yes. Pancakes. Yum. Raijin says, sorry, Hamdi.
Karina says, blue can win if red forgets the flag.
Raylan says, Yahoo.
Hamdi says, can I go blue laughs?
Raijin says, laughing out loud, so sorry. Raylan says, start again quick. Kielo says, you saved me from stepping into some dog's shit.
Dagny says, I'm so sorry the rounds are going slow. I'm not supposed to be here.
Socrates says, we need a rest between rounds.
Aimbot says, where are you?
Hamdi says, they killing me everywhere, maybe make new team, maybe yellow team.
Socrates says, keep going as you are.
Raijin says, hittering.
Eve says, lol.
Dagny says, I have no idea what happened to Goody. I was in my wetsuit with my surfboard about to go out the door and Thora messaged me Goody was a no-show.
Complex says, I hope Goody is okay.
Dagny says, I'm trying to peel out of my suit, put stuff away and run these games.
Raylan says, okay, well, start the next round. I have time for one more myself.
Dagny says, I hope so too.
Complex says, Ray wants to kill. Raylan says, WTH. Since when is Becky pounce in melee?
Eve says, sometimes bravery comes from believing you have more backup than you actually have.
Lol.
Mila says, winky face.
Rygene says, Dagmeade.
Eve says, not being a bitch. It's on me. I see you all were on others, but I seriously thought I had 3 people behind me when I charged Lyric.
Chrissy says, or in case you Eve, all will be fine once I'm in my bubble.
Rygene says, Tay love you, Eve. Raylan laughs. Eve has no fear.
Hamdi says, we can make 3 or 4 teams winner stay and loser changed, maybe will be more fun.
Mila says, ABD the others have to wait. Nope.
Hamdi says, yes.
Complex says, CTL. Kielo says, return that flag. Raylan says, dude, it was a long way away. Complex says, one more ray. Raylan says, okay, I'm out.
Eve says, no whining now, Hamdi. You chose your lot in life.
Raylan says, was lots of fun.
Melita says, need to go. Thank you all for the fun.
Eve says, later, Raylan. Bye, Melita.
Complex says, wow, I flew backwards. WDF.
Eve says, I didn't see. But maybe it was before our fight.
What the fuck?
Kielo says, 1 round away from keyboard.
Yeah.
Dagny says, have a band-aid for this lag. Let's all pretend this is Second Life in 2007 and we're raiding ghosts. Remember how laggy that was?
Complex says, 3:21 go.
Hamdi says, no.
Eve says, at that time I was playing on a lappy with 11 frames per second, but that was sometimes not as bad as this odd soup.
Chrissy says, Dagny, you can propose to move it elsewhere where there isn't lag, which is any other sim. Dagny says, I'm sending Amy to blue.
What the fuck?
Aimbot says, ma che cazzo?
Complex says, wait a minute. Aim. You are red.
Aimbot says, yes.
Raijin says, to do.
Aimbot says, bad time for me, thank you for the blue tag, laughing out loud.
Dagny says, thanks for playing Amy.
Raijin says, Nini daughter.
Hamdi says, I thought she said thank you for the lag.
Dagny says, Chrissy, these games will be over in about 15 minutes, and you're welcome to take everyone over to the jungle.
Eve says, good night, Amy.
Complex says, Count, are you playing?
Shut up.
Eve says, Hamdi killed me from rock while I tried to take advantage of his predicament. So mean.
What the fuck?
You were supposed to die like a good Hamdi.
What the fuck?
What the fuck?
Socrates says, Dagny, it was better when we could rest between rounds. Put your wetsuit back on.
Eve says, lol.
Socrates says, less seasickness and less RSI.
Dagny says, yes, but then you get the 321 protesters.
Rygene says, 321. Complex says, Sakya the only one seasick.
Socrates says, drown them like the rats they are.
Eve says, less talk about Dags trying to fit in a wetsuit and more rounds. Eve says, Socrates only uses seasickness as an excuse to set his cam above the Sime and sit back and record meaningless while he likely guzzles booze.
Asterisco sim.
At least that is my theory. So far, a lot of empirical evidence. Some of it philosophical, like he is a dork, but most of it empirical.
Poison Arrow says, thank you, Dagny, for hosting. I lagged too much today. It's impossible for me. See you next time.
Dagny says, thanks all for playing.
Mila says, bedtime for me, thanks for hosting Dagny and Goody.
Rygene says, night, Mila.
Karina says, thanks for the games. Dagny says, Chrissy will now steal you all to the jungle.
Rygene says, night all.
Dagny says, good night, everyone. Picahota says, good games, Thigh. Dagny says, round score. Red 8. Blue 7.
Eve says, give Goody hugs when she returns.
Sway says, good night, Jiggy.
Eve says, thanks you all for the games. Good night.
Dagny says, I will. Chrissy says, most are finished for today.
Kielo says, ciao, everyone.
Chrissy says, night all.
Socrates says, good night and thanks for the games.
That's it for today then.
Socrates.
Salty says, bye, everyone. Thanks for games.
Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe. The next Valkyrie Forest Capture the Flag will be on Saturday. I will now leave you with the Valkyrie Forest theme.
In the shadow of the fjords they rise, But betrayal turns day into night.
Valkyrie, Torva, hearts like steel, loyal hands, their strength you'll feel. Raise your voice, but tread with care. Cross them once, you're bound to despair.
Chains of gold for those who dare to challenge the queens of the northern air. Slaves to their mercy, or cast to the tide. Bow your head, or swallow your pride.
Valkyrie, Torva, hearts like steel, loyal hands, their strength